Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you might be around the world. Thank you for joining today's Ask a Professional Scrum Trainer. I'm happy to welcome Punit Doshi to the meeting today to help answer your questions and hopefully help you improve how you work. My name is Eric Naberg, and I run marketing and operations here at Scrum.org, and I'll be your host and taking your questions, or at least delivering your questions to Punit. Next slide. So just quickly about this series, the series we run on a monthly basis and try to help you really better understand Scrum and help you with how you're working, overcoming challenges that you may be running into, and hearing from different Scrum.org professional Scrum trainers or different experts around the world and their experiences that you can draw on. Next slide. So just briefly, who is Scrum.org? Scrum.org, we're founded by Ken Schwaber, the co-creator of Scrum, and he remains and continues to help lead our organization as our chairman. Ken has built an organization that's really focused on improving professionalism and helping people and teams deal with complex problems. We offer training, certification, as well as an enormous number of free resources like this webinar to help you improve how you work and improve your learning. Next slide. And with that, I will let Punit introduce himself.
Thanks, Eric. Welcome, everyone. My name is Punit Doshi, and I'll be your partner for next 1 hour. And hopefully the time that you spend with me, you'll find it valuable. A little bit about me. I have overall 19 plus years of experience, and most of it has been in IT industry, although I did have some areas where I worked in non-IT organization, especially either oil and manufacturing industry. In terms of my Scrum experience, I have been working with Scrum for over 6, or I would say about 7 years now, and I'm really passionate about it, and that's why I took on this journey. I would say most of my time is spent between about 60% on the ground, coaching the teams, spending time with them, helping them with implementing Scrum in the true essence of it. And 40% of my time is spent in trainings. I have a lot of my experience has been with banks. Pretty much about 10 years I've been working with different banks across the globe, and also currently helping one of the Indian banks in their transformation. I've been working with distributed teams in a lot of areas. I've seen the challenges day in and day out. Hopefully, if there are any challenges you foresee or you are facing right now in your areas, I'll be happy to answer your questions. And that's about it from my side. Over to you, Eric, again.
Great, thank you. Lindsay, if you can go to the next slide. So just some quick guidelines, and I see people are already following them. Your microphones are muted, as it would get very background noisy if everyone was able to speak at the same time. So please add your questions to the Q&A, the questions panel that you'll see in the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll take them from there. If we don't get to all of your questions, as often we haven't, Punit will respond to those the best he can via email. So keep them coming, and let's get started. So the first question is an interesting one because I know you spend a lot of time here. John asks, can you discuss if it's important for developers on Scrum teams to have taken the Scrum for Developer training? And I know you spend a lot of time, Punit, teaching development teams using the Professional Scrum Foundations class. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the importance here and what might make sense for development team members.
Yep, I did attend the PST workshop, and that's a 3-day workshop. I have seen a lot of value in it because I would say it's one of the hidden gems of Scrum.org. Because number one, we have a live legacy code. We take either a different technology stack, either it would be Java J2E code, or it can be .NET, or it can be Python code. Based on the expertise that people have, we work on that particular technology stack, and we don't just we go into Scrum framework and we start looking at the people and engineering practices that we bring to table. And people usually feel that even within the teams itself, the developers, testers, they work in silos. And this workshop is aimed towards bringing down that wall, bring the team together, and help them work together as one unit rather than people tossing over internally from one person to the other. I have joined it as a Scrum Master, and also I've seen it as a developer, and I believe it is something that adds a lot of value. Because remember one thing, you may have one product owner, you may have one Scrum Master, but you may have about 9 to 9, maybe a few team members, about 6 to 9 team members who would be working as development team members. If they don't get how the behavioral, the mindset shift, and what engineering practices they can leverage to their advantage, you might end up following mini waterfalls. And I think it's definitely a training that would bring a lot of value in people's day-to-day work. And I've seen once people go back to their desk, they're like, this is exactly what we needed. We have a lot of ammunitions that we would like to try out in our day-to-day work now. So that's my answer.
Great, thank you. So another question, Steve asks, who is responsible for delivering the project metrics to stakeholders?
Project metric. I think somehow I want to shift away from project mindset to product mindset. If we are talking about product related metrics, then I would say there are quite a few things we should be looking at. From product owner perspective, I would focus on, hey, what features are we have we rolled out? What's the feature usage index? Which features are being used more? Which ones are being used less? The other thing I would like to look at is, for the features we are building, what's the cost? How are we doing in terms of cost versus the revenue that we are generating? From development team perspective, the metric that I would think about is, how often are we building and integrating our, how often is the build and integration happening? How are our defect trends going on? In terms of development team, I would say also for product owner, how much time are we losing in terms of context switching? What I mean by that is, how much time are people spending in meetings which are over and above Scrum, what Scrum framework recommends. That is your daily scrums, the sprint planning, the daily scrums, your sprint review and sprint retrospective, and to a certain extent your backlog refinement. Other than that, if team is spending time on other meetings, that is definitely adding more to their context switching. So these are some. If you are looking at it from project perspective, I would rather say, like, hey, look at how the burn down is happening in terms of what you had planned originally. How are we trending in terms of our milestones? So that way, the forecast, you can replan as needed. I would rather advise the stakeholders to join the sprint reviews so that they get better insights in terms of how are we building the right product, and how much progress are we making in terms of delivering the valuable product. So these are some things. Definitely, I wouldn't look at velocity as an improvement area. It is definitely a great metric, but it is more for the Scrum team to leverage in terms of their forecasting and planning their sprints. So other than that, I would say if you use it beyond that, most likely team members may end up abusing it. And that is one thing I would rather not get involved in. It's a circumstantial evidence, not the outcome. So I would say it's not an outcome metric that you would like to measure. I hope that would have answered your question. I don't have anything to add. So Eric, back to you.
Great, thanks. So this is an interesting one. It's actually a good question. I think this comes up quite often in even today, even though Agile and Scrum's been around now we're celebrating its 25th anniversary or birthday this year. Mm-hmm. It still comes up quite often. Is there, if you had one thing to say to help sell the value of Agile and Scrum, what would it be?
That's an interesting question. I would say Scrum is meant to bring the life back at work. For me, whenever I hear the phrase in an organization that we need to maintain a work-life balance, that phrase itself, it's kind of like a paradox. That indicates that how little life is left at work. If we do it right, if we implement Scrum and Agile ways of working right, I would rather start seeing more life coming back at work and people starting to enjoy their day-to-day work and feel passionate about like, hey, today I'm going to go to office and do something awesome. If that's not happening, I believe we need to start introspecting on our ways of working, especially if we are implementing agile ways of working, implementing Scrum. Are we doing the right thing? I know there will always be pressure in terms of, hey, we have a lot of things to deliver. We are running low on capacity. We have tons of stuff to work on. But at the same time, if we are passionate about things, we would start enjoying. Along with these constraints, we will be able to walk through it and make our world, make our work a little better place. That's my take. That's one key takeaway I would like everyone to take back, saying like, if we are implementing Scrum and we don't start seeing life coming back at work, what should we do to make it better for us?
That's great. And when we think about Agile, and certainly when we think about Scrum, it's all about the team and the team being empowered, the team having the ability to hold each other accountable and responsible, but respect across that team as well, and bringing that at the end of the day, if you talk to Ken Schwaber, which I do quite frequently, Scrum is all about delivering value. If we're proving that we're delivering value, what's more gratifying to the team than that? And I think it starts the gratification. If you read the Daniel Pink's book on Drive, what drives people? It's not generally money. Money's a factor, but it's having an impact, delivering value. Those are the things that really drive motivation of individuals. So I think that's a great response, Punit. Thank you. So next question. This is one we've all probably run into in one way or another. How do you handle a situation where you're the Scrum Master and you're being disrespected by the product owner, and even potentially in front of the Scrum team? Any suggestions on how you would handle that and help maybe coach that product owner to be more respectful?
I think I have dealt with not same situation, but some situations like that. And usually my approach is always to take things offline and discuss with them one-to-one over tea, coffee, maybe some round of drinks. So let people loosen up. And a lot of my talks, wherever I have broken down the ice along with people, is when I do the conversations outside the office building. That's when people open up more, and I've noticed what are the frictions that affect folks more. So I definitely want to understand from the product owner, what is it that about my approach he or she is not liking, and rather team up with him or her and say like, okay, I understand your concern and here's what my concerns is. Let's together agree that if we want to do it the right way, what is it that we are willing to agree upon and work together towards it. So we need to understand that, yes, we have to deliver value. That's number one. We understand we will be running up against time pressure every now and then. At the same time, let's not go digress towards command and control rather than being empirical in our approach, understanding based on current situation on the ground, what decisions we need to make. So that's one thing I would definitely do, talk to product owner one-to-one and see what are the thorny areas which is affecting this relationship. And afterwards, hopefully things move forward. In case things still do not improve, it might be a good idea to think about is the product owner focusing more on the value or moving more towards project management? And if the person is coachable, great, we keep coaching them. If afterwards we believe that the person is not focusing on value and is very heavy command and control, and the development team is not able to sustain it, we may want to think at org level, what are the decisions that the entire Scrum team is willing to come together and discuss, like what's possible, what's not, and maybe get the managers involved later on, but provided everyone agrees that it is not something we are able to solve within ourselves. So that would be my approach.
Awesome. Yeah, it's interesting. One of our other professional Scrum trainers, Ravi Verma, talks about he doesn't like coffee, and he talks about gelato meetings. He said everybody's happy when they're eating ice cream. So he'll go out and go out for a little afternoon ice cream with somebody when they're having difficulty and start having conversations to get over the hump. So yeah, I think you're right on. Get it out of the office space. Certainly do not have the conversation in typing, because typing is probably the worst form of communication ever invented. People assume tone and read tone that doesn't exist, and all those things. So I think that's great. Get them out for coffee, get them out of the office. Let's have a conversation and talk about it and earn that respect. Or maybe there's just misunderstandings, who knows?
Yeah.
So here's another one. This is right actually out of the Scrum Guide, but I'll let you answer it. What's your recommendation when a user story is not completed in one sprint and there's still work left to do?
Okay.
I can open up the Scrum Guide if you'd like.
So if you are not able to complete the user story within the sprint, one thing I would suggest is whatever is done, if there is any part of the user story that is acceptable by the product owner, if it meets your definition of done and product owner is willing to accept it, that goes into your increment. If there are part of user stories which are whatever is remaining can be put back into the product backlog item, and product owner can decide whether it goes in the following sprint or later sprints based on what feedback we get from the stakeholders. That's one. The other thing I would suggest is, in case this is happening frequently, might be a good idea to leverage the sprint retrospective to see how can we reduce these kind of occurrences. Is it something we are missing out during our planning, or during our product backlog refinement, or are we keeping this our product backlog items or user stories too big that we are not able to deliver them within the same sprint? Might be a good idea to slice them down further so you are able to deliver the releasable user story by the end of the sprint. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks. And remember, it's all about the definition of done, right?
Yeah.
If that work item doesn't meet the definition of done, we can't release it. We need to put it back into the product backlog, and either refine it or reprioritize it. We'll probably have to, if we're estimating it, we'll have to re-estimate it because some of the work has been done. Nobody releases, even if the stakeholders say, yeah, it's good enough. If it doesn't meet that definition of done, we're not going to put that out, because often in the definition of done, there are quality things, there are security items, and lots of other things that are important.
So that's great. So it should meet your it must meet your definition of done, otherwise it's not acceptable. That's the great part.
Yep. Great. Thanks, Punit. So next question. This is a pretty long one, but I think I can kind of summarize it a little bit. We're about to start a new project, and the customer is asking to provide approximate estimations right from the start. So do you have recommendations on estimating and giving that feedback back to the client prior to starting? Because we know people want to know, when are you going to deliver what? Any suggestions or recommendations there?
Okay, this is a typical challenge in every organization. I'll assume that there are two possible scenarios. Either number one is, this is a customer that you have not worked with, And let's talk about when you have not worked with a customer before. In that case, you do not know the environment. You have a whole bunch of unknowns, which you have never faced with the customers before. And no matter how much planning you do right now, it is not going to help. What I would recommend in that scenario is maybe collaborate with the customers and say, hey, how about you give us a couple of features? We definitely want to work with you. Let's build a couple of features where we run 2 sprints with a small group of, a small team which we have ready, and who can build those features for you end to end, which can be release quality. That way you get to explore not all, but a lot of scenarios that you may not have thought of in the customer's area, that, hey, we don't know how stable their environment are. We don't know how stable their existing code may be. These kind of details will start surfacing up. So during the couple of sprints that you run, you can treat it like a proof of concept, where you are investing from your side to get some bit of hang of how things work in their area. And afterwards, you would have a lot more validated assumptions from your side. And then you can estimate the backlog from the customers based on how things progress during the 2 sprints. You have better reference points. You would be able to do better estimation and say, like, hey, based on what we know as of now, after 2 sprints, this is what we forecast. This is how much of how many story points we think of, and how much it may cost you. That is one. If the customer is an existing one, let's look at scenario number 2. In that case, you already have some history with that customer based on what you know on the projects that you have worked with the customer. You can look at the same team members who have been working over there. Let them do the estimation. Don't try to disband the team. Let the existing teams who have been with the client before, let them do the estimation, because now they have a lot more reference points over there to say, like, hey, based on whatever work we see right now in the backlog, this feels like what we have worked on before. So based on that, they will be able to give a little relative better estimation compared to starting from scratch. And then you can do the appropriate forecasting. And at the same time, I would still put the word as forecast. It is not something you can guarantee, because once a project starts, based on how things progress, you will learn, you will bump into unknowns, you will learn new things. Based on that, be prepared to collaborate with the customers and bring the facts, be transparent about it. This is what's going on. Things may change, we may be delayed, whatever be the scenario, just lay the facts on the ground, on the table to the customer, and collaborate and figure out what to do next. So I do not have a silver bullet answer, but based on the history that you have, based on the context that you have, you may have to pick and choose the right the approach that would suit better in your area. And whichever approach you choose, let's make sure we understand we are dealing with complex environment. Whatever estimation you do is still an estimate. It is not going to guarantee that things will work exactly as you think about right now. Once we move forward, you are going to bump into some unknowns, some surprises. It's okay. At least collaborate and put the facts on the table for the customers rather than hiding the facts. I hope that answers the question.
Great, thanks, Punit. So the next question, and this comes up quite a bit, it's really around where testing fits in Scrum. The question that Eleanor asks is, what advice do you have for testing in Scrum? The current problem that Eleanor is running into here is they have a QA team that's running a week behind the developers, so sprints are rarely done when they come to the end of the sprint. How would you approach that problem?
That sounds like a classic waterfall. So you have a few developers doing the development in sprint 1, testers would be testing it in sprint 2, and so on. So for me, it's a classic waterfall, and I would suggest you may want to rethink. Number 1, testing is not a separate phase. Don't think about testing as a separate phase. We have to start looking at collaboration upfront. You may want to think about engineering practices like test-driven development, behavior-driven development. acceptance test-driven development, and further, so that now you have test-first approach where upfront itself, the QA team members or the people with testing skills are now collaborating with the developers. If you have business analysts, whichever, bring everyone together, understand the scenarios that you are going to be looking at in terms of testing, and while collaborate with the developer to say, hey, here are the test cases that I envision right now, and the developer would come to an agreement upfront. So now you start building the quality in rather than testing it later on. If the QA and the developer, they are working separately, I believe it is going to hurt your team a lot more. And the same old ways that you were working, you are just bubble wrapping Scrum terms around it and saying like, yeah, we are implementing Scrum. In Scrum, it's very clear. Every sprint is meant to deliver a releasable product increment which meets your definition of done. If we are not delivering something that meets our definition of done, you need to rethink again in terms of what approach are we leveraging. Start bringing your QA, your performance testing, bring in automation, bring in a lot of areas that would help, the engineering practices, the tools that can help your team's agility go even beyond what your current level is. And that's how you start pushing things which are manual, mundane, repetitive tasks into machine cycles, and teams start working towards more creative work. So bring the QA part back within the sprint and make sure at every sprint you aim for releasable product increment, which meets your definition of done. That's my key message to you. And for that, collaboration is the key for all the team members. They cannot work in silos.
Great, thanks, Peter. So this another question that certainly comes up quite often. As many organizations have project management offices, PMOs, how can the PMO track progress of the product? Is it just being part of a sprint review?
I would say, yeah, it starts with sprint reviews, and at the same time, the PMO team members may want to work with the product owners to understand, based on the budget that is left and the progress that the team's making, whatever are the forecasted release timelines, how are we doing? So that way you are more supportive, and you can see it brings in a lot of transparency that, yes, we see how the backlog is shaping up, how we are burning or how we are trending in terms of delivering the features that are valuable for our customers. And as we see that more and more value is getting delivered, do we want to consider moving, funding this initiative more, or do we want to consider funding the other initiatives which may deliver more value? So collaborate with the product owners and start working towards at program level, how are we going to keep the funding running? So PMO, yes, sprint reviews is one of the key events within Scrum framework, which will help you see the progress we are making towards delivering valuable product. At the same time, collaborate with the product owners to figure out what would be the most likely next steps you want to take in terms of every sprint.
Yeah, I think that's great, and certainly that relationship with the product owner is so critical. The other part is, remember, this is all transparent. So the PMO or whoever's representing the PMO has full access to the product backlog and understanding what's happening with that product backlog. So at any time, if that product backlog is not transparent, it needs to be. So the PMO can come in and look at the status of items in the product backlog, understand where that product backlog sits, how the product owner has prioritized the information in there to truly get an understanding of status of what's been accomplished and the priorities of the items to come. There's a forecast. We certainly don't know what's going to get accomplished when until it's done. As things are unpredictable, but it gives them that visibility, and that's why, as described right in the Scrum Guide, the product backlog is transparent. It needs to be transparent to all stakeholders, the PMO being a key stakeholder there.
Yep. Thanks for adding that, Eric.
So the next question, this one has my least favorite word maybe of all time in it, velocity. Other than velocity, what could be metrics that one could collect to find the efficiency of a Scrum team and if the team is improving over time?
Okay. In terms of now when I'm still debating how to answer this because I would rather focus on the outcome. But if you want to see if the development team is doing a great job, number one, I would focus on are we having relatable increments regularly? I would hope for every sprint, but at least they are aiming to deliver relatable increment, which means our definition of done every sprint. That's one. The second thing I would look at is are the team members actually defining the goals every sprint? Do they have a purpose for every sprint, or they are just delivering user stories? A lot of teams I have seen, I feel this is one of the key missing pieces in the teams. They don't have any purpose or a shared goal. They just come in like, hey, we are going to pick up these 10 user stories. I ask them the same question. By delivering these 10 user stories, what's the value you're delivering? What's the shared goal that you have in mind? What's the goal we are trying to achieve in this sprint? And that's where a lot of teams fumble on. So that's the other part. If you really like to look at metrics very hard, then I would say look at the defects trends. Along with this, you can say, how are the defects trending in terms of, for last few sprints? Do we see the defects going low or the defects are rising? How much time are we spending on building innovative stuff? So all these metrics, if you really want to look at it, there's an excellent white paper that we have at Scrum.org, evidence-based management. It's available on our portal, and I would recommend everyone to read it because it gives a lot of great metrics that you should look at. Velocity is definitely not the metric I would look at. It's something internal to the teams. Let them leverage it for their advantage. Hopefully,
so thanks, Punit. And I just put in the in the chat to everybody a link to the evidence-based management site to get more information there. So definitely check it out. If you just go to scrum.org/EBM, you'll find that information. I think, and the reason I said I don't like talking about velocity is velocity is easily manipulated. I've had people ask me the question, oh, can I measure, or generally they don't ask the question, they state it, which is I measure my teams based on velocity and then I compare them. Is that a good idea? No, because one, as soon as I start measuring teams based on velocity, they cheat. What used to be a 3 is a 5. What used to be a 5 is an 8. People very easily and quickly can game that system. Two teams measure themselves differently. If I'm looking at, to my team, a 3 is a 3. To another team, a 5 is a 5. But it might be the same amount of work, and that's okay. Velocity is used to help me predict. It's not used as a way to measure growth in improvement necessarily. It's allowing me to predict what can get done and when it can get done. There are a whole lot of measurements that you can read about in the EBM site around really getting into, are we adding value? Again, going back to Ken, Scrum is all about delivering value to the organization, value to the team, and value to the users, the stakeholders, the customers. And there are lots of ways that we can measure that value. There's usability metrics. There are things like customer satisfaction metrics, innovation rate, gaps, and so on. So really looking at those items to see, are we really delivering value? Not, are we writing more stuff? I can write a lot of really bad or deliver a lot of really unimportant, unvaluable features very quickly. It doesn't mean I'm doing any good for anybody. So I think that's important.
let me elaborate on velocity, what it is and what it, this is some example I give in my workshop. Say if you're a pilot in an airplane and you are seated in a cockpit, in front of you, you'll have a whole lot of dials, things that would indicate height of the plane, the fuel tank level, all those details. So velocity is a kind of metric which is there within the cockpit for the pilot. If you are the pilot, that is the Scrum team, they can definitely use these metrics in terms of understanding, hey, at what height I want to keep my plane at, all those details. As a leadership team, the dials inside the plane make no sense for you. What you need to focus on is, hey, for the flight, every flight that we are operating, how many empty seats are we running here? Because every empty seat means we are bleeding money out of our pocket. Are our flights on time? How much time are we spending at the airport? Because I have to spend that much for the airport authority. So these are the kind of metric that the leadership team should be looking at. So same thing, evidence-based management is the white paper which indicates the metrics that leadership teams should be looking at to measure the outcomes rather than the circumstantial evidences, which are like the dials in the flight, like velocity. Hope that helps.
Great. Thanks, Punit. So here's a good one. I think this comes up quite often as well. So what retrospective and what improvement? Oh, okay. So what ideas do you have? I'm going to rephrase this a little bit. What ideas do you have to help in retrospectives and improvement ideas? If we're doing 2-week sprints and we're running our retros every 2 weeks, what if the team's unwilling or loses motivation for the retrospectives and they're not really bringing ideas for improvements? Do you have ways to reinvigorate that and to help drive the importance of continuous improvement?
I would put it this way. My best retrospectives have always happened outside the office premises. Take the team outside the office premises. That's where the facade that people have of professionalism will go out, and people will open up a lot more. The casual conversation between the team members, it encourages them to talk more on personal front and creates more synergy and brings the team together. At the same time, they will be open to challenging each other's perspective a lot more compared to being within the office premise. That's the number one takeaway, I would say. Second is change your retrospective formats as often as you get. Don't make it boring as, hey, what went well, what didn't go well, and what should we do next? If you are doing that, it's too darn boring. Change the format so that you start rejuvenating the team. It's okay to once in a while do a quick pulse check before you start with the retrospective to see the energy level in the team. Maybe something like a sad smiley, okay smiley, happy smiley, extra sick smiley. Think about different. Let people do a voting so you know the pulse of the team. And based on that, you can always alter the format and make it as interesting as you can. There are tons of books written on different retrospective formats, and try as many as you can and make it interesting. And the team should come back charged up during the retrospective. If that's not happening, I would say whoever is facilitating the discussions, whether it's a Scrum Master or any of the team members, should come up with some creative ideas. Make it fun at times. It's okay to cut the team some slack during the retrospective as long as they come up with one improvement area. You don't have to kill an entire elephant. Even if it's a small improvement, a baby step in the right direction, which is really hurting them right now. If there is any challenge that's bothering the team, if you can make a small improvement in that area, you have already done a good job at the retrospective. So from my side, take it outside, change the formats as often as you can, and make it interesting. Let the team, take them out for a sports bar or something where they can sit, relax, discuss. And once they discuss, they will come up with improvement areas without even knowing it. And that's when you will be able to say like, oh, we have few items that we want to take back. Just quickly take notes of it and make sure someone takes the accountability to make it happen. And that would help. That's my take. Yep.
Thank you. And yeah, I mean, this is all about continuous improvement and getting better. If the team thinks they're perfect, we may have a problem. There's a great website called Tasty Cupcakes, which has a lot of different exercises that you can run for not just retrospectives, but including retrospectives and some fun things and different ideas and thoughts. So check that out as well. So here's one that I think this is every time I've run this session, this gets asked, and this is always a fun one. So thinking back to your Scrum Master days, what did you find was most challenging for you as a Scrum Master?
A whole bunch of things. Some of my biggest challenges have been finding, some of the organizational impediments and how can I partner with the mid-level and leadership team to get their buy-ins first, and then get rid of the bureaucracies. I won't say rid of the bureaucracies, but reduce the bureaucracies to something which helps the team rather than hurts the team. That's number one that I would put. The other challenges is initially I had been a bit introvert person, so getting to interact with people and understanding the psychology in a lot of areas, it took me a while. So I did fumble, and I'm still fumbling. I'm sure I'll still commit a lot of mistakes, but hopefully fewer than what I used to commit about 6 years back. And that my goal is, number one, as Scrum Master, let my emotions not get in the way of helping the team, because a lot of times I feel that I want to solve the problem for them, and I would roll up my sleeves and say, hey, this is how we need to do it. And when I realized after attending the PSM workshop, like, there's not much difference between me and project manager, is it? So that's when I had to start taking step back in the right direction and say, okay, as Scrum Master, my goal is to show the mirror to the team and say, hey, is this going to help you or hurt you? You think about it, you take the decisions, and you take it forward. I'm there to support you. I'm not going to take the decisions for you. So going away from my project manager mindset to Scrum Master mindset was another bigger challenge that I had. And of course, the usual challenges that we always face is over here in India, we have distributed teams. The cultural differences, when you have people working from different zones, coming from different cultures, they are not sensitized to each other's ways of working, the habits, and how we communicate with each other. So what helped was letting the team come together for a few sprints and collaborate. And that's when people open up and they realize, like, oh, these are some of the cultural differences and some interesting things we learn from each other, and people take it back. So I can talk about this for hours. I don't want to do that. As Scrum Masters, number one, I would say keep your emotions in tab. You don't want to let it overwhelm yourselves. And second part is, don't prematurely solve the problems for the team. Let them learn from the mistakes. It's okay. Be okay with the failure at times, as long as it's not going to hurt the team really bad. And work towards organizational impediments. If you as a Scrum Master, you are going to throw up your hands and say, hey, this is how things work in this organization, there's nothing I can do about it, that itself means you have given up trying to improve the culture. And you may want to start looking at the kind of statements you make often and see, am I making the right, am I doing the right thing for the teams? Remember, it's not about you, it's about the team. Whatever you are doing, if it's helping the team, great, go ahead, do it. If you are going to not help them with any kind of impediments, which are something they cannot fix with all their self-organization capabilities, you may want to think about who can you partner with and leverage organizational, the mid-level managers or leadership help to get rid of those blockers or impediments for them so the team can be productive and they start focusing more on valuable outcomes rather than get into that rut of how do we fix this problem? This is really hurting us at times. So that's my take.
Thanks, Punit. There's several questions around the same topic. Obviously, they're all asked a little bit differently, but why don't we just attack it this way, which is around working with remote teams. So there are a bunch of questions about, how do I, as a Scrum Master, work with distributed teams? How do I make sure that communication occurs when there's distributed teams? How do I engage? How do I run events? So overall, I think there's a theme here, which is, as a Scrum Master, how do you help ensuring success of distributed teams?
Right. Okay. So here are some thoughts I want to share. If you have co-located team, you can say like, hey, the team can be this level of productivity. When you have teams which are distributed, the productivity will always be lower. It cannot be this much because there are certain challenges that we have to agree that there will be some bit of latency added, especially if you are going to work in different time zones. So let's agree on that. We cannot be having a great productive team if you are going to have distributed team. And if your distribution is going to happen such that there is a very limited overlap between the time zones of the people working in different geographical locations, if there is very limited, if it's not beyond 3 to 4, if it is less than few hours a day, it is not going to work out well. So some things that we have done is, I have noticed in the teams that I have worked with, during the initial few days or few sprints, it's best to co-locate the team members together in one location. If possible, do that, let them come together. So they start seeing each other face to face, interacting with each other and learn more till the point that the one team spirit that, hey, we are all in this together, it starts kicking in. That's very crucial. I have seen it when people are working in different locations and they don't come together often. They start working in silos. And once it becomes a habit, breaking that habit becomes quite tough. So before it goes to that level, it would be great if you can have the team members come together, at least for the initial days of the sprint. That's one. Second is, you definitely want your organization to invest in the tools and technologies and infrastructure, so to allow more face-to-face conversations, either via some kind of Skype calls or any video conferencing. I would definitely not advise using audio conferencing much, because I've noticed it, people just dial into the bridge and put themselves on mute. Doesn't help anyone. So definitely you want to have those face-to-face conversations. Since now the teams are distributed, at least leverage that video conferencing facilities. So you need to invest in the technology. The next part I would say is, you want to prioritize the Scrum events, especially because team members are located in different locations. During the overlap time, if you do not have prioritized Scrum events, people will have conflicting, priorities, and because of that, hey, I cannot attend this because I have to go somewhere else. It's not going to help anyone. So that's the next part. You want to, foster a culture where people foster shared culture where people are able to understand, hey, I am from India, and the way we work over here might be different compared to people working from some European location. We come with different cultures, and there are times when these cultures, it comes across as a shock when you start interacting with people across the globe. You may want to start sensitizing your teams in terms of, hey, let's work together. Let's understand from each other how things work in your area. So that's another part. Having a team working agreement definitely helps. I would highly recommend, whichever team you are part of, have a virtual, or a physical board which is collecting or gathering your team's agreements, like, hey, what are the ground rules we want to set for ourselves? Like, what are the hours when we do not want to be disturbed so we can stay focused on the certain work in hand? So that's one. And the last point I want to add to this is nail it before you scale it. Basically, before you start scaling your team, like instead of having one Scrum team, you want to have 3 or 4 more Scrum teams. First, get your foundations correct before you start scaling to multiple teams. Because if your team has not become productive, if you do not have a good reference model within your team and you start scaling, you are going to scale your dysfunctions exponentially, and it's going to hurt you a lot more. That's another part. And leverage every opportunity you get across locations to have deeper collaboration. Doesn't matter which city you are in, which country you are in, as long as team members are accessible and they are sensitive to each other's time zone and they are willing to collaborate with each other, I think you would still get a great team to work with. So these are some of the tips I can share with you. I think I have a recorded webinar, which is there on Scrum.org website about distributed Scrum teams. It's for 40 minutes. I have been discussing on that, so you might want to go through that as well.
Great, thanks, Punit. Yeah, and you know, I did a webinar probably about 2 years ago now on working with external agencies. We redesigned a few years ago the Scrum.org website, and of course we used Scrum, and our team was fully distributed. Our Scrum Master worked for the agency that we had hired to work with us. And he was based in the Boston area. Our development team was mixed between Scrum.org employees and contractors through the agency. They were in 4 different time zones, I believe, 3 or 4 different time zones and multiple locations. The product owner was me. I was remote as well. And we used technology, constant communication we'd even do developers would do pairing, and they'd use technology to do pairing. So technology comes in very helpful, building trust. One of the hardest things is just building trust across the team and cadence. So building that trust was super, super critical, and that comes from, you know, as we've been talking about throughout, that comes a lot through communication.
Yeah.
Yeah, we use video a lot because it's that personal side. It's not just a voice on the other end of a phone, and avoiding typing whenever we could.
Yeah, you nailed it, Eric. I think as long as there's a trust between the team members, things will go through smoothly. And to build the trust, deeper collaboration, and if possible, bring the team together once in a while so that they get to meet with each other face to face, spend some time together, and it promotes more deeper trust among them. I think the people will be able to overcome any conflicts they have after that. Most of them.
Agreed. Awesome. So we've probably got time for 1 or 2 more, maybe a little bit. We'll see. So this is one that comes up quite often, is product versus project. Why do we focus on products and not projects in Scrum?
Okay. As we discussed earlier, also Scrum is about value delivery. And our main goal is always like, hey, whatever we are working towards, if it's not going to add value, why are we working on it? So just to sum it up, the survey says about 60 to 65% of the features that are built are never used. Then why are we building those, right? So these are some of the assumptions people make, that, hey, these are really high value features and we need to build it. And here's the project. And for this project, this is the time, this is the cost, and this is the time, cost, and scope of the work. If you are not going to keep validating the scope as often as you get, you might end up building a product which is not going to have much value. You may run a high risk on that front. So that's why Scrum over here, we focus on value delivery, and for value delivery, we need to start looking at products rather than projects. You can have a project which is within the budget, which is within the cost and the time, but you may end up building the wrong product. How is that going to help you or your client or anyone? So that's one reason why we are making the switch. And at the same time, we need to understand with the current volatile world that we have, things are changing rapidly. The market conditions are changing rapidly. Whatever you are thinking, the product that you are envisioning right now that you want to build, the project that you may be working on, if you don't adapt to the changing requirements, if you don't adapt to the changing market conditions, you are again running a risk of not building the right product. And that's why we are saying slowly, make the needle move away from project to the product. So now you are focusing more on the customer. What value are we trying to deliver to the customer? If we are delivering value, it is helping our customers, and it is also helping us in terms of improving our return on investment. We know we are heading the right way. So that's why we suggest focus more on the product. I'll give you an example. I was working at a bank earlier, and in terms of the brick and mortar bank where we go open our accounts and operate it, in that itself, the bank had about few thousand applications, about 1,000 plus applications. And eventually the leadership team decided, like, okay, if we are going to have product owners, how should that be? And we realized that the application owners may not be the best people to play the role of product owners, because now you are talking about application, which is still, again, a project mindset, and the application may have internal interfaces. No one is using it at the end. And eventually we decided, let's look at what features are we building for our customers. And to build those features, it may touch upon so many multiple applications. So whichever applications have to be worked upon, bring the teams together, have one person assigned over there to play the role of product owner and say, okay, this person is going to look at this particular product, and we are going to help our customers. And for that, we may need teams which may cut across different applications to support it. So that's my take. Focus more on value delivery by focusing towards the product. Are we building the right product is the question we should be frequently asking ourselves, by testing our hypothesis, by handing things over to our customers, getting the valuable feedback, and based on the feedback, keep adapting and building the right product. Okay, Eric,
great. Thank you. And I think I want to be conscious of our time box, and we're about out of time here. So thank you, Punit, for I think this is a great conversation. There are a lot of questions here in our, I'll say, backlog that we'll get to via email. I apologize, we can't get to them all, but we probably could have gone for another hour or two. Lindsay, if we go to the next slide. So just continue your learning. Follow our learning paths. If you go out to resources on the Scrum.org website, you'll see resources for product owners, Scrum Masters, development team members, and agile leaders. And these are to help you continue your learning. Learning never stops. We're always refreshing. And by the way, these are all free. Take advantage of them. Continue the learning. Join these webinars and others that we have on a monthly and sometimes more frequently than monthly basis. Next slide. So with that, again, I want to say thank you to the audience for taking the time out of your day. Thank you, Punit, for taking the time out of yours and helping the audience. And with that, have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks, Rick. Thank you, everyone.